Hi there, Titans, and welcome back to another Titan Academy video. Today we'll be talking about the form element in Titan Web. If you missed our previous video showing the layout and structure of a form element, I highly recommend checking that out. Today we'll be focusing on the logic and interactivity of a form element. Specifically, we'll discuss hide and show logic in a form element. We'll talk about form interactivity, such as adding a submit button or page breaks to your form. We'll discuss how you can affect elements inside of your form element using form interactivity, such as resetting the data of those elements, making those elements mandatory, disabling them, making them read-only, validating those elements, and a whole lot more. So the first thing I want to demonstrate, and it's something that we've shown before, but I'll just show it very quickly, is one of the main benefits of a form element, and that is the resizing capabilities that you have. So for example, if I have a shape here and I'm just going to add a button, and this button is just going to hide my shape. And I'm walking through this relatively quickly, but essentially I'm going to affect an element. I'm going to affect my shape, and I'm going to make sure that I'm hiding this shape on click of this button. Now notice what will happen when I hide this shape. I'll just go ahead and save my project and preview. And you can see here that when I hide my shape, the rest of my elements jump up and take that shape's place. So instead of being left with a blank gap, I actually end up with my elements resizing and taking the place of the shape. And that's really one of the main powers of a form element. Now, on top of that, another couple of cool things that we can do with our form element. So for example, I have here a radio button asking if the end user is a US citizen. If they are a citizen, I want to go ahead and hide this entire row. And I'll say I don't need it at all. And instead of hiding the individual elements, we'll hide our row. Now, in order to help us do this, we've already renamed our row. You can do this from the row itself by clicking on the three dots and clicking rename. And you can also right click on the row in your layer list and rename from there. We showed this in a previous video. But now we'll see why it's so important to name your rows. So I'm going to head over to this element and I'll write a condition. And my condition is going to be a fairly simple one. I'll say if they answer yes to this question, and I'll also have an outcome for when they answer no to this question. Of course, I can use the else of the condition over here, but I'm just going to set up two nodes like this, and I'm going to affect elements, and I'm going to find my nationality row. And just to show you why it's so important to name this, so I look at the rest of my rows, it's really hard to tell which row I want here. So the fact that I've been able to name my row helps me really narrow down exactly which row I need. So if they answer yes to this question, I want to hide this row. And if they answer no to this question, I want to show that row. Just like that. All right, so take a look now. Based on how our end user will answer this question, we'll be able to hide or show the entire row without hiding and showing the specific elements inside. So because it's already by default on yes, we're hiding our row. Once we move to no, it's showing our row. And as I change the options, we can hide and show our row. I'm going to get rid of this row now, and I'll demonstrate another cool hide and show logic that you can set up where you'll notice these two elements are actually in the same cell. And generally that is not best practice. You even get a nice warning here telling you not to do this under most circumstances. But there is a circumstance where you want to do that, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate here, which is when you want your fields to replace one another in the same cell, then you can add them to the same cell. And I'll demonstrate why you need to do this. If I add a row after here, and I move my, let's say, driver's license over here, now if I conditionally show or hide each of these fields, they will not end up on the same row as nationality. So driver's license will never be next to nationality. And I want essentially these fields to replace each other depending on the answer to nationality. So I'm going to put this back in this cell, and I'll demonstrate how this looks. I'll delete my row. And I've already got a condition set up here, but I'll just show you how it works. The condition basically says that if someone answers US to this, then I'm going to go ahead and show my driver's license and hide. Let's actually take a look. We'll show the driver's license, but we'll hide the passport number. And if they don't answer US, any other outcome, I'm going to show the passport number and hide the driver's license. Let's take a look. As you can see, I'm seeing passport number, and that's because I don't have United States selected yet. If I select United States here, this has been changed to driver's license, and it's almost even hard to see that it changed because it really just replaces it entirely. So we'll take a look again, we'll move it to Turkey, and you can see we get passport number. We'll come back to United States, and it will be replaced with driver's license number. All right, now let's take a look at some of the options for interactivity for a form. So we have a few options here. I'll run through them quickly and we'll just focus on two. We can hide our form on load. We can disable parent resize so that when we move our form, the strip doesn't move with it. We can also add page breaks, which we will demonstrate. We can include submit button, which we will demonstrate. You can ignore validations. You can include a reset button, which will reset the values of all of your fields on your form. You can add success messages and error messages, and you can do partial render, which could improve the UI of your project or the speed of your project rendering. Specifically, if you have an extremely long form, in general, you will not need this, but it's here if you do. So if I add page break, what this does is adds multiple pages to my form. Now, currently my form is only 3 rows. Let's add a couple of rows just to kind of demonstrate this. But if I head over to the gear icon, I can set how many rows I need per page. So let's say I want 2 rows per page. I'll apply that. Now I can see I've got my 2 rows and I have multiple pages, and each page shows me 2 rows. All right. I can also include a submit button on my form, and you can style this button, and then you can configure a submit action and build an action flow right over here. In general, you can also simply add your own custom button to your form and build your action flow based on this button. You'll have more styling options with a custom button, but you can also use the built-in button for the form if you'd like. Now let's talk about how we can affect the elements inside of our form. So I'm going to head over to this button to show it. But basically, we have a number of options under interactivity, and we'll demonstrate some of them. All you need to do is select your form, and you can, of course, name your form so that it's easier to find if you have multiple forms on the project. And we have a few options, such as resetting the values of the elements inside of your form, running a submit action, going to next page, previous page, or a specific page if you've enabled page breaks on your form like we showed, validating fields, and we'll actually demonstrate this. Also have is changed and reset change state flags. This is a specific use case where you want to know if your end user has actually updated the form in some way, and in that case you might run specific actions. You can also disable and enable the fields on your form. You can set those fields to be mandatory or not mandatory, and you can make those fields read-only or editable. So I have a number of buttons, and we'll just show you how you can make everything mandatory, how you can validate fields, disable, read-only, and reset. Just to show you, for validate specifically, I end up with a couple of options. Once I validate my form, it will say if all the fields on my form are valid, you can do one action. If invalid, you can do a different action. In my case, I'm just showing different messages. All right, so let's take a look at that. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just make my form mandatory, and you can see all of the elements inside my form have now become mandatory. If I click validate, it's going to validate all of the fields on my form and tell me to fix those fields. If I fix those fields, and this goes for value rules as well as mandatory, this validate action. But when I do click validate, now I'm going to get your good to go, and that's because all of my fields are properly validated. I can also disable my fields, and you can see that now my fields are grayed out. Of course, for all these actions, I have the opposite action to set not mandatory, to enable, to make it editable, as we showed. I can also make these read-only, so if I have some kind of input, I make it read-only. Now I can no longer type here. I cannot interact with any of my fields. And I can also reset my form to its initial state like that. And so you can see the form element is a really important, really powerful feature, and I recommend everyone using it on your project. And that's how it's done.